Your body has already lived the worst-case scenario you keep replaying in your head, every detail of that catastrophe you're afraid of, the loss, the rejection, the failure. Your cells have processed it as if it already happened. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why that mechanism is the most dangerous form of creation most people never recognize. Think about the last time you lay awake at night running through something that hadn't happened yet. A conversation you were dreading. A diagnosis you were afraid to hear. A phone call that might bring bad news. Your heart rate climbed, your palms got damp, your stomach tightened into that familiar knot. Your body responded to a scene that existed only in your mind with the full weight of its chemical arsenal. Stress hormones flooding your bloodstream, muscles tensing, breath shortening, the same cascade that would fire if a stranger followed you down a dark street at 2 a.m. Your body cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined event and a lived one. This is the mechanism that makes visualization powerful for athletes, actors, and performers. But it's also the mechanism that makes chronic worry so destructive. The same tool that can rehearse excellence is rehearsing disaster in the background of your mind, sometimes for hours a day. Neville Goddard taught that the feeling is the secret, that the state you occupy internally is the creative act itself. He described imagination as the workshop where reality is assembled before it appears in the physical world. Most people hear that and think about positive visualization. They picture the dream house, the relationship, the career breakthrough. What they miss is that this principle has no off switch. It works in every direction. When you worry, you're occupying a state. You're generating feeling. You're giving your body and your subconscious mind a blueprint. And the blueprint says, this is what's coming. So why does the body respond so completely to something fictional? The answer lives in how your mind processes sensory information. When you remember biting into a lemon, your mouth waters. Right now, reading that sentence, something shifted in your jaw. The image alone triggered a physical response. Scale that up to a full emotional scenario, one charged with fear, loss, or humiliation, and the response scales with it. Adrenaline, cortisol, elevated heart rate, suppressed digestion. Your biology doesn't fact-check the source of the signal. It receives the emotional charge and mobilizes accordingly. This is where it gets personal. Because most people aren't worrying for 5 minutes and moving on. They're running the same fearful scenario dozens of times across weeks and months. Each repetition deepens the groove. Each replay makes the emotional response more automatic, more familiar, more like home. And familiarity is the key that unlocks everything, because your subconscious mind is drawn to what feels familiar, even when what feels familiar is suffering. Goddard called this living in the end. When you live in the end of your desired outcome, you feel its reality so completely that your entire inner world reorganizes around it. Your assumptions shift, your expectations shift, your behavior shifts in ways you barely notice. The same process unfolds when you live in the end of your feared outcome. You feel its reality. Your assumptions reorganize around the expectation of loss. Your behavior adjusts to match someone who is already defeated. Cautious where boldness is needed, defensive where openness would serve you. Withdrawn when connection is the answer. You've seen this in your own life. You've watched someone spiral into worry about a relationship and then show up so guarded, so reactive, so braced for rejection that they created the very distance they were afraid of. The worry rehearsed the loss, the rehearsal shaped the behavior produced the result. And then the person pointed at the result and said, "See, I knew this would happen." They were right, they did know, because they built it brick by brick in the theater of their own imagination. The Hermetic tradition captured this with the principle of mentalism. The idea that the universe is mental in nature, that consciousness is the substance from which experience crystallizes. Within this framework, a thought held with sustained emotion functions as a creative act. Worry, then, becomes a sustained creative act aimed at outcomes you'd give anything to avoid. You're pouring the same energy into fear that a deliberate manifester pours into faith. The mechanism doesn't care about your preference, it responds to your frequency. Here's where most people get stuck, though. They hear this and feel guilty. They add a layer of anxiety on top of the anxiety. Now they're worried about their worrying, afraid that every fearful thought is a prayer for disaster. That guilt becomes its own trap. Because guilt carries its own emotional charge, its own hormonal signature, its own creative weight. The way through is subtler than brute force. You can't fight worry with willpower alone. Trying to suppress a thought is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The pressure builds and it eventually explodes upward with more force than before. The shift comes from understanding what worry actually is, a misuse of your creative faculty. Your imagination is doing exactly what it was designed to do, generating vivid, emotionally charged scenes that your body treats as real. The problem is the direction, the content you're feeding it. Neville's practice of revision offers one of the most elegant solutions. At the end of each day, you replay the moments that disturbed you, but you revise them. You reimagine the conversation going well. You feel the relief, the warmth, the resolution. You give your body a different experience to process. Over time, this practice does something remarkable. It trains your imagination to default toward outcomes that serve you. The groove of worry gets shallower. The groove of constructive imagining gets deeper. But, and this matters, the practice requires honesty. You can't slap a positive image over genuine fear and expect transformation. The fear needs to be met first. Acknowledged, felt without resistance. When you stop fighting the worry and simply observe it, something shifts in its texture. It loses density. The emotional charge weakens because you've withdrawn the one thing that was powering it, your belief in its reality. This is the inner work that separates genuine transformation from wishful thinking. It demands consistency. Some nights, revision will feel mechanical, hollow, like you're lying to yourself. Those are the nights it matters most, because you're building a new default, and defaults don't change in a single session. They change through repetition, the same repetition that built the worry habit in the first place, redirected toward an outcome worthy of your energy. Consider what your body has been rehearsing lately. What scenarios have you been running on repeat? What emotional states have become so familiar they feel like just who you are? That chronic tension in your shoulders, that low hum of dread before you check your phone, that reflexive flinch when something good happens because you're already bracing for it to be taken away. Those are the fingerprints of a manifestation practice you've been running unconsciously. The discipline of mental diet, as Goddard described it, means monitoring the inner conversation with the same vigilance you'd bring to monitoring what you eat. Every internal scene is a meal your body consumes. Every rehearsed fear is a dose of chemistry your cells absorb and respond to. Over weeks and months, that diet shapes your body, your energy, your expectations, and through them, the circumstances that show up in your life. Critics within the spiritual community sometimes argue that external circumstances are too powerful to be shaped by inner states alone. And external circumstances do carry weight. Relationships, environments, and systems all exert real pressure. But the question worth sitting with is this: how much of what you call external was shaped by the inner state you occupied before it arrived? How many of those circumstances are downstream of assumptions you held so long they became invisible? The relationship between inner and outer runs deeper than sequence. It's a feedback loop, and the point of entry, the place where you actually have leverage, is always the inner state. Your imagination will run tonight, whether you direct it or not. It'll generate scenes. Your body will respond to those scenes with full chemical conviction. The hormones will flow, the emotions will absorb the blueprint and go to work making the familiar feel inevitable. The only question is what you'll feed it. The same catastrophe you've been rehearsing for months, or something that, when you feel it fully, makes your whole chest open up with the quiet certainty that it's already done. One rehearsal builds a prison, the other builds a door. Your body can't tell the difference, but your life will.